Hello, dear comrades. Today we continue the series of lectures on the concept of public safety, dead water, and the important subject of today's lecture will be the significant subject matter of the concentration of control that occurs in supersystems. In the introductory overview lecture, we already discussed that the process of concentrating control over the productive forces of humanity occurred both at the regional and global levels. An example of the concentration of control over productive forces at the regional level is our country, USSR Russia. You remember from history that first there was the Moscow Principality, and then the lands expanded through the efforts of the Cossacks, and the unification of peoples took place. Yermak Timofeyevich, Dezhnev, and so on joined lands to the Moscow Principality. A similar process was occurring at the global level, and the first to approach this issue with awareness were the ancient Egyptian priesthood, which developed a strategy for conducting globalization. We talked about this in very general terms, and now, after we have examined the processes occurring in supersystems, we can take a deeper look at this process, how it unfolded, and what its causes were. And we mentioned in the introductory lecture that this process is objective, meaning it does not depend on our desires, whether we like it or not. It was happening. What is its objectivity? It lies in the fact that on planet Earth, countries and peoples initially lived separately from each other, and their influence on one another was minimal. But as soon as they began to interact, which included the development of transportation means and mobility, the more powerful system or part of the supersystem inevitably subordinated the weaker elements. Well, an example of such influences can be taken from trade. For example, I have better wheat, and I brought my wheat to your market, influencing trade and subordinating it to myself. One can also go by force, take by war, conquer and annex elements of the supersystem, subordinating them to one's will, interests, and goals. Thus, one can implant religion into the consciousness of neighboring peoples and countries, thereby locking them into solving the tasks set by the leadership of that country. One can marry a prince and princess and unite the kingdom. This has objectively occurred in history, and from a scientific perspective, it is a process of concentration and centralization of control over productive forces, and this should be viewed through the vector of management goals, through the complete management function. Here in the picture we remember that a supersystem is called a supersystem, the elements of which have memory based on which they can self-manage. These elements can manage other elements by transmitting informational influences, that is, by controlling them. They themselves are subject to management from other elements, because they are influenced by information from other elements. Remember that little diagram where all this is illustrated. And if we overlay this diagram onto human society, what happened? If someone has more powerful information and consciously applies it, they set a vector of goals in relation to other elements, influencing them with this information of various kinds, which include achieving certain goals. Remember the structural and unstructured methods of management. When information is presented to many elements in various ways, they begin to do what I need and respond accordingly. Therefore, here, schematically, this process can be indicated as follows. First, this element influenced the nearest elements and joined them, subordinating them to its will. Then, having penetrated and made them do what it needed, these elements themselves carried out the tasks set in relation to others. That is, they were incorporated into the vector of goals of the one who started this process of concentration, and so on. That is, the area was gradually expanding. Here you can see the step-by-step joining of elements, subordinating them to the tasks set by the initial element. If we now transfer this picture to planet Earth, then on a global level, it originated in ancient Egypt, creating a specific army. hidden in one of the tribes, the tribe of Levi, becoming Levites, the spread of information, the subjugation of countries and peoples, a totalitarian pyramid, remember. And now, whether we want it or not, whether we like it or not, this globalization is actually complete. But since the vector of goals contained principles such as divide, pit against each other, and rule, and this vector of goals did not align with the vector of the hierarchically higher overarching management, all of this has now come into conflict with the hierarchically higher overarching management, and naturally, a lot of problems arose, which we have discussed with you. So, in the concept of public safety, the force that has been managing for many years, according to the biblical concept, is called the global predictor. Why is it called that? Global word. Because of the claim to global governance on planet Earth. And the predictor is a forecaster that sets the goals for which all other elements of the super system should work. In other words, all of humanity. Currently, at this moment, the global predictor no longer completely responds. Why? Because over the years of its rule, the global predictor has lost its functions as a forecaster. In fact, it has turned into a controller. If earlier the ancient Egyptian priesthood, which set goals and guided the behavior of many people, directed the efforts of kings and rulers towards achieving certain goals, now this function has been completely lost. And in fact, what is called the global predictor is that they perform the function of a controller. Those who are interested individuals and want to gain a deeper understanding of this phenomenon can read the novel by Hermann Hesse, The Glass Bead Game. In this novel, Hermann Hesse describes how control is maintained at the modern stage, what the global predictor is, and how it operates. The implementation, having lost the ability to realize its intentions towards all of humanity, this global mafia, which originated in ancient Egypt, has created for itself a sort of head like Professor Dowell. That is, they can no longer assess the situation and come up with any solutions. And they, Hermann Hesse describes the abstract country of Castalia, which you can consider as Switzerland with a lake, where there is Lake Geneva in the center of Europe. And they created a monastery where boys are raised, and these boys are trained in such a way that they are capable of developing new informational modules, what we discussed when it comes to intelligence. And the glass bead game consisted of the task given to them to listen to musical compositions and express that musical piece with an analogy of modern color music, using colored threads of beads, and the one who did this best would win a prize. Then, for the formation of such an analogy of modern color music, well, it was a static analogy. There was a cube, and in this cube they hung these threads. A literary work was superimposed on the music, and a historical description of events was applied to the literary work, and it was no longer necessary to carry out this, so to speak, to form this cube from colored beads, but it was necessary to present some kind of report. The task was to summarize certain general information from various fields of human activity in a generalized form and present a report on the work done. And what is most important is to do this based on the multitude of emerging factors. Therefore, the global predictor is now working with an artificial head, meaning they do not think for themselves but use the achievements of scientists. Therefore, the scheme that we are looking at now, look at how it looks. At the top of this pyramid is the apex. Well, earlier it was 22 hierophants, the occult world government, meaning they have under their control the hereditary supranational corporations of clan financial families, the so-called Priory of Sion, which divided the entire planet into provinces. Below them is the supranational transnational unified leadership. It is based on millionaire conferences. They also have an executive committee. This is the so-called VSO, System EOD of the age. In general, the data presented in this scheme are collected from a very large number of sources, which are now very numerous in our country. This includes Masonic lodges, various secret organizations, and so on, including publications from the Soviet period, and I even watched a film for official use by the special services, where all of this was described, that is, how it functions. At the bottom of this pyramid are all these diverse and various organizations, United Nations organizations, transnational banks, parties, unions, organizations, Masonic lodges, Zionist organizations, and down below, under this pyramid, people do not see everything that is above. They only see the signs meant for the crowd. They see these Masonic lodges, transnational banks, corporations, and the global predictor, which leaves the management, saying that the Masons are to blame for everything. What is located above? Supranational, transnational, unified leadership, hereditary state corporate clans. Ordinary people do not see or understand, and they blame the Zionists. Beat the Jews, save Russia. The Masons are to blame for everything, but in reality they are just a tool. Based on this system, therefore the trick of this global mafia, and we have examined the actions of anti-globalists in particular, is that they present a fiction to the crowd while they hide behind these signs. The crowd does not see the true culprits of what is happening, but only fights against the signs, and as a result, they achieve nothing. But the famous names that are so notorious are also represented here. They can be seen on the diagram. These are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Montefiore's, Mendels, DuPonts, Oppenheimers, Stearns, Coynes, Sosens, Wallenbergs, Goldschmidts, and so on. You can read about them. According to various sources, there are about 358 clan financial families in the world, are part of this hereditary supranational corporation of clan financial families of the world, and they implement their plans through millionaire conferences. They also have an executive committee, and then there is the WSO EODVEC. What is this? WSO is the World Zionist Organization, founded in 1897. In 1897, I alone or I will understand differently. JAD, Jewish Agency for Israel, founded in 1929, and WJC, World Jewish Congress, founded in 1936, allegedly an alternative to the WSO. In the year, well, supposedly an alternative to the high. But in reality, all of this is under a single leadership, just different names, and in principle, the management of social processes is implemented through Judaism. That is, here too, Jews are made the scapegoats for all troubles, although many surnames at the top of this supranational corporation of clan financial families are indeed Jewish. But it must be understood that the global predictor is not just surnames and physical embodiments. The most important thing is that a concept looms over them. That is, the idea, the ideology that probabilistically predetermines their decisions, which were once laid down by the ancient Egyptian priesthood. In other words, they are prisoners of this very concept. In other words, global predictor is a connection of both people and ideas, and when we will consider after this lecture how egregores work. What is an egregore? After this, it will become clearer that the ordinary consciousness of people who do not understand bioplasmic structures, do not understand the power of ideas over people, asks where they sit, in which cave they have hidden, how they manage this. Moreover, not knowing what non-structural governance is, they conflate politicians' statements, in particular, that there is a world government. This does not mean that this world government sits somewhere and has distributed responsibilities. Minister of Finance of planet Earth, Minister of Defense, Minister of Industry. No, they govern in a non-structural way, guided by ideas that were once formed by the ancient Egyptian priesthood. And when a situation arises, all these people, dozens and 300 families, make decisions as their ancestors did. That is, knowledge is passed down before that. And when a situation arises, they set tasks. Moreover, scientists track all trends occurring in public life and adapt new currents, including in the scientific world, to their interests. In particular, in our estimation, they adapted the teachings of Ronald Hubbard, who perhaps did not know what we are talking about now, how to make a person's life happy, by drawing cybernetic analogies. So he is a rap. Rap. He, of the brain exists by technology. He developed methods to free a person from fear, from suffering, to make their work more productive in management. And those who track this say it will be useful to us. And by slightly adjusting, they probably decided to use those people who are guided by this teaching to achieve their goals. That is, there is continuous monitoring. Of the processes occurring in society. And this pinnacle of power, what they need, supports and implements it in their understanding. And what is unacceptable is either twisted to their side, suppressed, discredited, or dealt with in some other way. So, basically, this is how it works. If we have touched on issues related to Ronald Hubbard, I must add to what we discussed about types of psyche, and make a remark about something else. Where did homosexuality even come from? We are saying that a man is psychologically subordinate to a woman through instincts, slightly. Well, this is the nature of man. Therefore, there are grounds to believe that the ancient Egyptian priesthood, which formed the concept of managing social processes, aimed to avoid being enslaved by women and not to be psychologically subordinate to women. That is, not to live in a matriarchy. They lived among themselves, so to speak, man with man. And why are these so-called blue infiltrations occurring in all spheres of management structures now? In the West, and in our country as well, same-sex marriages and so on are emerging. What are the roots of this phenomenon? The roots of this phenomenon also lie in deep antiquity. That is, those leaders who understood all this aimed to escape the state of matriarchy and not to be psychologically subordinate to women, as instincts do exist. Here you have, so to speak, the answer to the question of where, as they say, the legs grow from. But this is unnatural to the human being. Therefore it leads to degradation, disrupts the information state of a person. When are such like this is, on a complete marriage, etc., all this is generally well. Against the will of the Creator, if it comes to that ultimately, this contradicts the designs. So how can people reproduce from generation to generation? And when this enters the culture of society and takes hold of people's minds, it leads to the degradation of the super system as a whole. This is how one should view the current situation as well. Therefore, this scheme of the global predictor is interesting. What are the methods and ways of concentrating control over productive forces? In the broad and intricate concept of public safety, the various elements and factors involved are systematically reduced and categorized into 6 distinct priorities. These priorities serve as generalized means of effectively managing and organizing people within a community or society. This approach ensures that public safety measures are both comprehensive and efficient, addressing the diverse needs and challenges that may arise in different situations. A priority is the level of significance, that is, the degree of importance of the power of this priority, and they are arranged by power. At the top is the most powerful priority, the first, and then the power decreases, but the speed of action increases. The 6th priority, the lowest, has the least power. But with its help, one can quickly achieve the desired result. And in fact, the managerial activity of concentrating the productive forces of humanity was carried out by all these priorities in combination. The only thing that prevailed in a particular historical event over a period of time, and in fact, all of this was done together. This is still being done now. Therefore, let's consider these priorities slowly and draw parallels about how this is done now in our modern life. And we will start from the simple to the complex. The simplest priority is conventional weapons, conventional means of destruction, means of killing people and material structures. But how can one simply conquer another country and make people slaves in that global slave pyramid that you have hopefully already understood? Forces and weapons. How to make a slave work. I point a gun at him and tell him to dig. And he will dig. If he doesn't dig, I can kill him. And under the threat of death, the slave will do what I need. If you conquer a country, you must make many people slaves so that this country works for you. You conquer a country. You place armed people everywhere. Patrols walk on the corners. We have all watched war movies. And the country, its people, resources and wealth work for the goals set by the conquerors. But this weapon, as you can see, is not very effective. Why? Because the overseer who stands over the slave digging, if he turns away. And we have seen how prisoners escape in movies. They kill that overseer and run away. If a country is forcibly conquered, then people flee to the forests, start guerrilla warfare, can kill the invaders, and so on. In other words, this is very unstable. Recall the concept of management stability, that is, the power of weapons. This method does not ensure stable management of processes. Although it is possible to achieve goals quickly, ensuring stability is difficult. Therefore, a more powerful priority is the fifth priority, which is the weapon of genocide. The oldest are alcohol and drugs. That is, what is sung in the wise Russian song, "You don't need a knife for a drunkard, just pour him a little and do whatever you want with him." And if we draw parallels with the previous management priority, you don't need to point a gun at a person to make him dig a hole. True, it will take a little more time. You poured him a shot today. Do you want to drink? Here, dear, drink up. I'm treating you. The next day you poured another shot, about 100 or 150 grams of vodka. Do you want to drink? Do. Here. So you fed the person alcoholic beverages for a month. And after a month, he will come with trembling hands and say, "What do you want me to dig?" You spent a lot of time. For example, on getting him drunk, and then the result is more stable. The most impressive example from human history in this sense is the capture of the Indians in America. We have watched many movies about Chingachgook with you, but few know that there were very few invaders at the very beginning, yet they destroyed an entire civilization of Indians. According to various sources, there were from several dozen to several 100,000 people there, or maybe even 1 million in civilization. There were only a few dozen invaders. There weren't enough bullets to kill the Indians. What did they do? They made running stills directly from the gun barrels, handed them to the tribe leaders, and the Indians had fun and celebrated. As a result, what do we have now? Where are these Chingachgooks? They live in reservations in their own country. If we draw parallels regarding our country, look at what is happening. Across our land, an overt alcohol nicotine genocide of the people. Women are already drinking in the villages. The villages are abandoned, and children in schools are already drinking this proper beer during breaks at 12, 14 years old. It's just terrible. And the drunk and sleepy do not think their own thoughts. Remember everything we talked about regarding the sense of measure and the gene pool, about the genetic core that ensures the reproduction of generations. In other words, there is an overt genocide. Drugs are added to alcohol. If we are to conclude about alcohol, And again about the role of religion. Joy of Rus is drinking. We cannot live without it. Who said this? Baptizer Vladimir the Red Sun, who is a saint for us. Who corrupted all the girls in his kingdom and state, he is now a saint for us, and introduced wine drinking. Can you imagine, for a little child to take communion is like a little bitter. And now imagine if a little baby is given a teaspoon of alcohol. This is equivalent to 100 grams of vodka or something else for an adult. And so, from childhood, a gradual alcohol addiction begins. This is the joy of Russes. There is drinking. Here you have the means of control. And indeed, probably predetermined, people who are alcohol dependent behave accordingly. And drugs also solve another problem. They reduce the population. That is, drug addicts do not live longer than 30, plus or minus 2 to 3 years. They do not live longer than 30, plus or minus 2-3 years, do not live. Do not live. Moreover, they pay for their own murder. Drugs cost a lot. If you pull the thread and find out who is protecting, where it was brought from, regarding these drugs, thread will lead to the English Queen. Because the English royal dynasty has controlled the global drug market since the Opium Wars in China. And when we see conflicts, especially in the United, or rather in America,